Hey, what's going on? I'm Mons, and this is Mons on the Mic, where we uncover the chaos that is unfolding in our country. And if you're interested in chaos, check out my book 20 and Out. It's available on Amazon in hardcover, Kindle, and paperback. And today we're going to dive right in because if you've been following my podcast, you've been exposed to just a few of the operations of the CIA and of members of our government, the DoD, in things like the Gulf of Tonkin, which was a false flag incident in Vietnam, which actually started the Vietnam War, claiming that there was an attack on an American ship that never happened. You've seen operations like Sea Spray by the CIA, which actually ended up killing American citizens. You know about Operation Northwoods, which was a plan by the Joint Chiefs under JFK to do false flag attacks in America, killing civilians and military members and blame it on Cuba so that JFK would have an excuse to invade Cuba because we were afraid of the commies that were so close to us. I introduced you to Edward Bernays, who was basically the father of mass mind control. He convinced the entire country that fluoride, a toxic byproduct of aluminum production, was so good for you that they put it in the public water supply. So I've shown you bits and pieces, and there's so many more. MK Ultra, the mind control experiments. There's so many examples that I have shown you to kind of warm you up to the idea that maybe all of these things are not individual events that have happened for a small picture in time. Maybe they are all interconnected, and maybe there are a group of people that are behind it and manipulating the whole thing. And as I was thinking about this episode, I was debating on whether or not to put a tinfoil hat on because I said people are going to think that I'm crazy. But I think there isn't any more time to delay and warm people up to the idea of a globalist control of a one world government endgame plan that is in effect, that has been in effect for over 100 years. You can go back to Jekyll Island in, I think it was 1917, where a group of people, bankers, a senator, an advisor to Woodrow Wilson, all met under cover of a hunting trip on an island off the coast of Georgia and devised the Federal Reserve. The bank that isn't actually part of the federal government, but is a bank that loans money to America. And Woodrow Wilson was convinced or went willingly along with signing this into creation, which basically then put the United States permanently into debt to a group of people that were not elected by the people. And even when Woodrow Wilson left office, he spoke about how he regrets that decision because he realized what he did to this country. So throughout the past over 100 years, there have been many plans, small, tiny little steps at a time, done seemingly innocuously under the cover of it's for the greater good, it's for the help of the people. But each one of these steps has been leading us to a one world government. So if you want to have an idea of what a world government would be, it would be more of like the feudal system in Europe when you had the serfs that would farm the land and you had a few nobles who owned everything and controlled everything. That is what these people want to get back to. And opening your eyes to this is, I understand it probably sounds like this is crazy and a conspiracy like this. How could it be hidden if so many people and so many nations are involved? Well, it's not hidden. It's in plain sight. They do these things in plain sight. They talk about these things in plain sight, but it's not advertised. And what they do is they keep you busy with nonsense, with page six and, whatever was going on in Hollywood and the newest movies coming out and that this issue is going on and this issue, and it's all smoke screens that are covering up for what they're doing, and they're no longer hiding it because they don't really need to, because their plan is so well deployed that they kind of have had control, especially with Obama and Biden. But now that Trump has taken over, he sees what their plan is, and he has upset their plan so greatly that the roaches are coming out of the woodwork and they are meeting in public, discussing in public what they need to do to regain control, because Trump has toppled their plans pretty effectively so far, and they are scrambling to figure out what their plan B is going to be. So if you're skeptical of all of this, I totally understand, and you were trained to think that way. And it reminds me of a job that I had. When I was working in the South Bronx at a Simpson Street in the animal cruelty unit, I had a kid. I think he was 12 years old. He had taken a stick and he had beaten a kitten and beaten it so severely that he basically flattened it to the pavement. So I caught the case and I got video of the incident. I spoke to the police that were on the scene. I spoke to the superintendent of the building where the kid lived in the projects, and I arrested the kid and I brought him and his mother back to the precinct. And when I was debriefing them, the first thing I did was I showed them the video and I said, and the kid said, yeah, that's me. And I hit play. And him and his mother watched the video of him retrieving a broomstick handle from a utility closet inside the building, following him, exiting the building. There's a little black kitten that is seen running from him. He's chasing the black kitten. And shortly after he chases the kitten, you see him raising the stick and beating the kitten. And then where he's beating it is where the police found the kittens. Potentially circumstantial, but really the totality showed you that this kid did this horrific act. So I showed this video to the mom, and right away, the mom denied that her son did that. The first excuse was the kid was already dead and he was just hitting it with a stick and, he shouldn't have done that, but he's just a boy. And then I showed her again the tape of the kitten running, and it was the same kitten that we had recovered. And again, she denied it and said her son wouldn't do that. They have a cat in their home and he's kind to that cat. And every argument that she brought up, I refuted. And yet she still refused to believe the simplest of explanations, which was the truth, was that her son beat this kitten to a pancake on the concrete. And I think that inability to grasp what is actually happening has been ingrained in all people over the course of decades by these people, because their first thing that they needed to do was to hide what they were doing, because they knew that people who are now like Americans that are now in an advanced society, we have freedom, we will immediately reject any intimation that these people are looking to take over control of our freedoms. So you have to go and slow that temperature of the pot slowly, because like the frog, if you throw a frog into boiling water, it's going to jump out immediately and run. But if you put the frog in cold water and you slowly bring it to a boil over maybe decades, it will be too late for the frog to jump out before he realizes he's in boiling water and there's nothing he can do about it. And that's pretty much what has been going on with this desire to create a one world order. And I know it sounds crazy. I totally hear you. But these are things, and I encourage you not to just listen to me. I am just a voice of exposure to show what is going on, because I've done this research and other people need to understand what it is. And the people who have spoken out about this have been demonized. They've been called a psycho, conspiracy theorist. They've been demonetized on YouTube. Their videos have been taken down. They've had to do this because if you let the truth come out and if you let people speak the truth, then people will open their eyes. But if you hide what the truth is, people have no way of finding it. In my opinion, if this wasn't actually true and there was no globalist world order, they would be easily refuted, these conspiracy theorists. It wouldn't take much to refute it. But when you keep looking and when you know what to look for, more importantly, these things are seen all over the place. So we'll go back to the Russia and Ukraine war. What was the real issue? Was it really Russia that was trying to take over land in Ukraine that had once belonged to Russia? Not really. What was really going on is that Ukraine, under President Zelensky, who was installed there by our government and NATO, basically, and these other globalists, Zelensky is a puppet who answers to the globalists in the one world, Ukraine was going to join NATO. NATO is the muscle of this group called the Club of Rome, who answers to the Committee of 300. The Committee of 300 is basically the head of this entire idea of the globalist New World Order. Vladimir Putin, understanding what the actual situation was, did not want NATO, who basically their plan is to invade Russia under the guise of pick anything, dictator, horrible human, tortures his own citizens, make up whatever excuse you want. And as we've seen in history, they will make up any excuse they want to invade. Their plan was to invade Russia using Ukraine as a launching point and break Russia up into little districts, similar to what the USSR was before it was broken up back in the 80s. And then Russia would now belong to NATO, and that territory would be covered. And it's basically a world game of Risk. Vladimir Putin recognized that he wanted no part of that. So he decided that the best defense is a good offense. So he acted offensively and invaded. And that was really what the Ukraine Russia thing was. And the reason why Putin is not going to acquiesce is because part of the agreement is that Ukraine can maybe join NATO, and that threat will always be there. So just imagine where the United States and Canada and Mexico belong to China and Russia, who really want to take us over. Would we be comfortable with them setting up shop in Canada and Mexico? No. So that was Putin's response. So that was the whole reason for the war in Ukraine and Russia. At the very heart of it, you have all the noise that goes around and surrounding it, and Crimea and Georgia and all this stuff. That was the reason why. And the reason why when Trump was president the first time, Putin did nothing is because he knew that Trump was not going to help NATO because the United States funded mass amounts of NATO. Trump was not going to help NATO to invade and to destroy Russia. So that's why Putin didn't feel the need to invade Georgia like he did during Obama's administration or attack Ukraine during Biden's, because he knew that Trump wasn't going to advance on his country. He recognized Russia's sovereignty. Maybe we don't agree with the way that these people treat their citizens, but that's not any of our business. Trump's desire is to create sovereign nations throughout the world, because what we have now is we have nations that are indebted to the Council on Foreign Relations, and they're indebted to the World Banks and the WHO and all these other organizations, where they basically have been denied the ability to create their own governments because the people that are in charge of their countries are paid off by these large groups to keep in control and to keep them suppressed. And that's all there is to it. So what you have is you have the Committee of 300 and you have the Club of Rome, which is another group of people that does the bidding of the Committee of 300. And NATO does the bidding of the Club of Rome militarily, or basically the strong arm of the Club of Rome. Then you have all these other subsidiary groups that work together to further this advance. So you have like the Council on Foreign Relations, you have the Bilderberg Group, the Royal Institute for International Affairs. England is always at the center of all of this. Their desire to be the ruler of the world, like they were, a couple of hundred years ago, has not diminished. So there are many plots of this group to basically put us back into the dark ages, put us back into medieval times, and to allow them to have the power and have the money and have the control. And that's really all this is. It's just pure evil. So when you talk about, you can talk about evil and good, or you can really look at this as a spiritual war between good and evil. But that's what we have going on here. So one of the plots was the environmental movement. Nuclear energy is the cheapest, most abundant form of energy that you can create. Knowing that, the Committee of 300 knows that if countries create nuclear energy as a form of electricity, they will create more wealth. They will create industry. They will create manufacturing. They will give people jobs. The people who have jobs will have money to spend. And that trickles down and creates richness for the people. And these people do not want that. So what do they say? We have to demonize nuclear energy, and we have to make it look like green energy is better for the environment because we are in a climate crisis. So they get all of these people that are part and parcel to this Committee of 300, like Bill Gates and Al Gore, to go out and go on a campaign of demonizing fossil fuels. Fossil fuels has been the singular. Besides the creation of the United States, fossil fuels has skyrocketed people out of poverty faster than anything else in the history of the world. Without that cheap source of electricity, we would still be farming land, living crop to crop, dependent on the weather, incapable of being able to enrich ourselves. So we have to demonize fossil fuels because that is actually what creates independence in people. And if people are independent, they can't be controlled. So what do? They go on this campaign. Fossil fuels are bad. It's destroying the ozone. It's heating up the earth. Well, okay, if the earth is heating, it's actually better because things die in the cold, but lots of things grow in the heat. I mean, look at the Amazon, right? You have the Amazon rainforest. There's a lot of stuff growing there. Granted, the desert, things don't grow, but with electricity, you can bring in water, like you see in Dubai and Egypt and all these places. They can they can change saltwater desalination plants into drinking water. And now you're able to create civilization where there was none through the use of electricity. So they go on this whole campaign, and there are allegations. It's not ever going to be proven. Maybe somewhere there's one document or something that proves it, but supposedly the catastrophe at 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania, where the nuclear power plant had a meltdown. Supposedly, that was actually manufactured by this group that needed an excuse to demonize nuclear energy and to show that it was dangerous. So that was created to say, look how dangerous this is. All these people, they had cancer, a lot of people died, but they used that to demonize nuclear energy and to make it look like it's so dangerous, we can't use this. What is the alternative? Well, we can't go to fossil fuels because fossil fuels make the atmosphere dirty and we're not going to be able to breathe. Okay, so then what's the other alternative? Well, we're going to go to solar, we're going to go to wind farms and all these other forms of green energy because they're really good for the earth. I mean, we're just using the wind. And at first, it sounds really good, just like all of the plans of the Committee of 300 in the Club of Rome. They spin it to make it sound like a positive thing. Well, we're going to help the environment, but they don't go into the wind farms and how much land is used to create these wind farms and that it needs oil to actually spin those turbines. And those turbine fins can't be recycled. They have to be buried in the earth where they just rot away. And then you need concrete and oil to build those things. Then you go into solar panel. I have solar. If you don't have batteries, it doesn't matter if the grid goes down. If you don't have batteries, those solar panels aren't going to work. You're not going to have power. There was another interesting article. Kathy Hochul is apparently clearing hundreds and hundreds of acres of woods in upstate New York to make room for solar farms. So we're destroying the natural beauty of upstate New York to clear the land to create solar farms that don't create anywhere near the amount of power that fossil fuels, natural gas, or oil will create. It's totally dependent on the actual sun. And it's not going to be efficient, and you're actually going to create a energy shortage. And that's actually the goal. But see, they don't tell you these things. When Al Gore was going around with his inconvenient truth and all this other stuff, they don't tell you the downside of the green energy. And the downside is what Trump called it out to be. If there's no wind, you don't have wind energy. If there's no sun, you don't have solar power. The batteries don't get recharged. You are out until the sun comes out again. So it's not reliable, and Trump called it out for what it was. So they have to demonize him. And this is why they have gone after Trump so hard compared to all other presidents in the recent history, is because all the other presidents went along with this plan. They didn't object to it. And it's possible they didn't object to it because they believed in this plan. It's possible that their lives were threatened because these people will go to any length to silence their opposition, as we have seen with Trump. They have made up fake allegations against him. They've gotten people to go after him for lawsuits for stuff that never even happened. And they've even tried to assassinate him 3 separate times. This is the lengths that this group will go to silence anyone who wants to disrupt their plan. And so that is why Trump is a target. And that is why you see the mainstream media who are way down the line in terms of where this hierarchy is. And they are told, you're going to destroy Trump. We're going to demonize him because if we tell the people, if you're told something enough times, you're going to start believing it. And they learn these through MK Ultra experiments in the 50s with the CIA, which I exposed, which you can even look at the declassified documents. And obviously there's even more that's there that we don't know about because the CIA raided Tulsi Gabbard's office and took all of the MK Ultra documents that she was going to declassify. So who knows what more stuff was going on. But the environmental plot with nuclear energy was absolutely done by the Committee of 300 because if countries across the world use nuclear energy, they are not going to be dependent on U.S. foreign aid, which means that the International Monetary Fund and the Council on Foreign Relations will have less control. And these organizations are all falling under the Club of Rome Committee of 300 hierarchy. So what you have is you have these rulers of these nations take aid from US foreign aid and the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and the rulers get rich. They let the IMF come in and raid their country of natural resources, and the IMF pays them off again. And so everybody gets rich except for the citizens. They remain in poverty and they die of starvation. And this is their plan. For an example of this, if you think that I'm crazy, this happened in Zimbabwe. They have high grade chrome ore. So this guy, Ian Smith, was the president, and he never took foreign aid from USAID. He wanted to break away from British rule. So this guy Mugabe leads an armed insurgency against the government. Britain brokers negotiations, they end the war, and Britain sets up democratic elections. And amazingly, Mugabe gets elected. He takes 300 million in cash from US foreign aid. And so now Britain controls Chrome. So this has happened before. And this is just one example of how it happens all across the world. And this is what is done. It's manipulation, it's extortion, and it's power plays. And it's a giant game of risk. And this has been going on for a very long time. And Trump is upsetting this very system. And they don't like it. The foreign aid bill, Rockefeller pushed this. In 1946, it was passed. It allows our government to take tax dollars and give to foreign governments for aid. So bribery is basically what it is. We're going to give you this money and you're going to do what we want. And by we, I mean the United States and the City of London Corporation, who are working in cahoots with this committee of 300. Trump is pulling out of all of the groups that belong to this. And that's why they're so upset. And that's why they have to destroy him and demonize him. So the Club of Rome began in 1968. This guy, Aurelio Pecci, says we need to have a one world government. And they use NATO to put forth all of their policies. And another guy, this guy, Dr. Alexander King, he was a member of the Club of Rome, and he took control of the National Teachers Association. He tells them, this is what we're going to do. We're going to change the lessons in America. It's not going to be America's great anymore. It's going to be that America is built on slavery. It's going to be the 1619 Project. It's going to be founders were evil. They were slave owners. Keep going on down that rabbit hole. And then you have Obama creating the Common Core system where he ensures that federal oversight of what is taught in classrooms is spread throughout the country. And now you can look in your textbooks and you see diversity, equity, inclusion all over math, English. It demonizes white people. Any other minority group is victimized by the evil white man. And that is done because they have to demonize America. That's all that it is. Then you have this guy, Dr. Kurt Lewin. He created the strategic bombing survey in World War II, which basically chose to bomb the workers of factories and not the factories themselves, because these Committee of 300 in the Club of Rome they foment these wars. They want these wars to happen because it makes them richer. And it kills people, which is the collateral damage they're looking for. I know this sounds crazy. Believe me, I know, but there are books on this. There are tons of evidence hiding in plain sight that you don't know what you're looking at until your eyes are open to this. The successor to the strategic bombing survey was FEMA, and FEMA's trial run was 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania. There's a crisis. FEMA jumps in, they take control. And we saw what happened during the floods in North Carolina, Tennessee, that FEMA went around, and there's documented evidence that if they saw a Trump sign or somebody who was a conservative, they didn't go there to offer them help and federal assistance. They only went to the people who believe in their cause, power and control. This is all part of the same giant circle. So you have the environmentalist movement that is all about green energy, pushing the green energy bill, AOC. All of that stuff has to do with creating actually less energy, less reliable energy, and creating shortages, which is going to make things cost more money, put people back into poverty, and allow these people more power and more control. Then you had this thing called Tavistock. So this guy, John Rawlings Rees, was a major figure in creating Tavistock. It was founded in Britain after World War II. And it came from the Tavistock Clinic, which focused on psychiatry trauma and group psychology. It really started in the 1920s, where they started studying the shock syndrome from the trenches and how it affects soldiers and the group mentality. And then it branched into this. And then from this, it expanded into propaganda. How does propaganda affect mass amounts of the population? How do people act organizationally, psychologically, when there's war, when certain stimuli are put onto a population, and it goes into even workplace dynamics. So this guy Rees pushes the idea that psychological methods can shape societies, not just individuals. So all of these individual ideas start coming together to form the methods that are used to control a population, keep it stupid, right? The teachers don't really teach the ability of critical thinking anymore. They just teach you to memorize and be a good worker. The country is bad. So why would you want to live or work or contribute to a country that is evil and is rooted in evil? So America starts falling apart from within. It's all demoralization. This is all part of the plan, because if America falls, it can be broken up into a bunch of little pieces and they maintain more control. They take your natural resources and the rest of us are thrown into poverty. So this all happened, I'm going back 50, 100 years ago. And how are we seeing the effects today? And where am I getting this evidence from? Well, if you want to find the evidence, you don't really have to look any further than the meeting that just occurred in Armenia of the European political community. And ironically, Carney, who is the Prime Minister of Canada, was invited to this meeting and he spoke. And if you want to look up clips of this meeting, I encourage you to do so. Don't take my word for it. Do the research on your own. I created this podcast because I know a lot of people don't have time to do the research and they don't know that this is what's going on. So they don't understand when it's in front of their face what's happening. The point of this European political committee is to discuss things like the Ukraine Russia disaster, a migration. We've seen a mass influx of migration from the Mideast, from mainly Muslim countries who have nothing in common with the culture of Europe. And I've shown on previous podcasts the UN plan for the replacement migration theory, which again, CNN and all these major news agencies called it a conspiracy theory. But I told you on that previous podcast to Google migration replacement theory, United Nations, and the entire plan will come up. And the plan is that, well, the people aren't really reproducing themselves to reproduce the population. So we have to have mass amounts of people from the third world be brought into these countries to back up the working population. What they don't tell you is that this mass influx of people who don't understand the culture, don't appreciate the culture, they are used to living under tyranny. They're used to being controlled, and they don't care to learn or appreciate the country that they now find themselves in. And it creates disorder and chaos at the street level. So instead of having a group of people that in a country that are working to create more jobs and to create more energy and to create cheaper energy and more goods, you have people now who are battling with, say, the Muslims who were brought in and imported into their country, who are creating the third world country in their country. They're turning Italy and Germany and France into the third world hellholes that they came from. So now instead of this group of Italians or Germans or Frenchmen working to advance their country and to become richer and better and more advanced, you have them battling day to day in the streets with these people who are looking to take over their country. So while that squabble is happening, the rich and powerful maintain even more control. Other things that are discussed are energy in this group, because Europe relies on the Strait of Hormuz for their oil. And without the oil, they don't have power. If you remember a couple of years ago, there was a shortage of natural resources to provide for heat in the wintertime. Cybersecurity, we are seeing more and more reports coming out about the Dominion voting machines and Smartmatic voting machines and the allegations that are made against those industries, that they were created in Venezuela, that really China was creating the products that were put into it, and they've been manipulating the votes and switching votes. So these are all allegations that have been made, and there has been some evidence of some of it coming out. But again, it will be suppressed because they need to ensure that the people that are going to go along with this plan will be elected, and they can't have somebody like Trump come in and upset their whole thing. And that was why they had this meeting in Armenia. They also discussed regional conflicts and economic coordination, how to work together. So who is a part of this group of the European political community that just met with Carney as their speaker? Well, you got the president of Armenia. You have Keir Starmer, who is from the UK. He was the prime minister. Him and his Labour Party took a severe beating because the people of England are revolting against what they're seeing these leaders in their country do. You had Vladimir Zelensky go from Ukraine. Emmanuel Macron from France, Poland, the European Council, the European Union, a representative from NATO, a representative from the Council of Europe, a representative from the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. And that group works to monitor elections. They work to prevent and mediate conflict. They work for human rights and democracy and arms control. All of these things sound really wonderful, but really what it does is work to coordinate with countries to maintain the plan that the Committee of 300 puts forth. Who else was at this meeting? You had the Belarus Democratic Opposition Representative and Switzerland and Turkey. So all of these groups met, and they do meet twice a year. And what came out of this meeting was basically Carney saying Trump has upset the status quo of us being in charge and controlling everything, including Mideast wars, including the United States, because the United States was our partner, and they no longer are. And they are working to take away our power with the entire war in Iran, with the Strait of Hormuz. They're taking away our ability to control what we had controlled, and we need to stop him, and we need to figure out how to stop him because what we've done is not working. And that was this whole meeting's purpose. So what plans came out of there, we will know because it will be exposed in the upcoming weeks of what chessboard moves that they keep doing. It's very interesting, especially with you have people like Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer and Obama were very good friends. Keir Starmer himself has said that Obama and him speak frequently, and Obama is the former president that he speaks most often with. It's almost like Obama is kind of running the scenes behind the scenes, working to undermine Trump's presidency by keeping alliances with these people who do not have the United States' best interests at heart. So you wonder why Obama would keep in touch with these people. Reports in the UK also say that the relationship between Starmer and Obama was helped by David Lammy, who was a senior labor figure close to both men. Lammy studied at Harvard and had longstanding ties to Obama world Democrats. Obama had strategy discussions with Starmer, talking about rebuilding the Labor Party. And the Labor Party is not for the people of England. They purport themselves to be again, but it's always the pivot. It's not really what they're there for. So Starmer adopted Obama's style. And if you remember when Obama ran, his whole thing was we're going to fundamentally change America. And at the time, people thought, well, that's great because we were under Bush with his never ending war, his invasion of Iraq, which to most people didn't make any sense. If you don't understand the globalist one world order plan, it made no sense. But if you understood that there was a one world order and Saddam Hussein, as I spoke about in the last podcast, was not going along with that order and they had to remove him and they used the United States to do so for control over the oil. But Obama sold his ideas, making it look like he didn't agree with Bush when he absolutely did agree with everything Bush. He was on the same plan. And he said outright what he was going to do fundamentally change America. And he did. He used the Department of Justice to go after political opponents. The Fast and Furious operation, where him and Holder sent guns over to Mexico and sent them to cartels with really no ability to trace them, which caused the death of untold amount of Mexicans and at least one border security officer. But Obama was Starmer's mentor. He gave him advice. He helped him with campaign and messaging to convince people that Starmer was for the people, just like Obama was for the people. And that worked really well for Obama. He won in like a landslide. Starmer had control. And just recently, there was an election and he and his party took a really big hit, which is good for the world. But the point of this is there is a bigger picture that's going on here, and all these little separate pieces that don't appear to be working together actually are. When I talk about little pieces, I'm even talking about pieces as small as like this kill switch thing. So in 2021, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act was passed. Biden signed it into law. And one of the stipulations of this was to direct the National Highway Safety Administration to create rules to stop impaired driving. Well, the fallout of this good move to stop people from drunk driving, I mean, who wouldn't sign up for that, is that they're going to put a kill switch in every car. And there's two ways they can do this. They will either monitor your blood alcohol content using sensors in the car, or they'll have sensors that will measure your eyes and your alertness. And if the car determines that you don't appear to be alert or focused, it will disable the car. It'll turn it into basically a turtle and you won't be able to go anywhere. The problem with this, obviously, is that people who have been convicted of drunk driving, they have those interlock devices where they have to breathe into in order to start the car. They've been convicted of a crime, and this is the penalty of their crime, right? What this law does is it says everybody is presumed guilty and you're all going to be penalized. And the end game is that somebody has control over your ability to move freely. So there have been, and this was meant to go into effect this year, 2026, 2027 cars were supposed to have this. So there's been a lot of efforts to repeal this law, none of which have been successful. But once again, they passed something in 2021 under the guise of, we're going to really work hard to stop drunk driving and to make car manufacturers disable vehicles so we can't have any more drunk driving deaths. We're not going to have it go into effect for 5 more years. And the reality of it is actually restriction of movement for normal people. So say I'm the designated driver and I get into the car and I'm totally sober, but the 4 people that are in the car with me that I'm driving home are wrecked and they reek of alcohol. The sensors in the car are going to go off. They can't tell if I'm the drunk or if the passengers are, so it disables the car. What happens if there's an emergency? A husband is driving his wife who's in labor, screaming in pain to the hospital, or there's some type of other emergency where somebody's fleeing from an attempted carjacking, or name any of the other myriad of reasons why people will drive in a panic to a hospital or to get help. And the car will recognize, oh, this person's eyes are wide, they're driving erratically, they're obviously intoxicated, activate kill switch, car is done. So the problems with this, again, it wasn't that this wasn't a forethought. This was actually absolutely part of the plan. The restriction of movement, the 15-minute city, is part of this one world order. If they restrict your movement and your ability to go from place to place, your ability to own property, you will be a slave to the system. Trump signed a bunch of executive orders tied to housing affordability and home ownership. He stopped large Wall Street firms from buying single family homes. Why would you need Wall Street firms to buy single family homes? Because they want to buy them so that they can rent them, so that nobody can own their own private property, because owning your own private property is a foundation of the freedoms of this country. If you have your own land, you can grow your own food, you can do with it what you want. But if you live in a rented property, you are a victim of whatever the owner of the property wants you to do. And if you don't buy an electric car or you put a Facebook post up that they don't like, that the powers that be don't like, you are removed from the system. They kick you out of your home. You have no power or authority over anything. You have no control over anything. That's the plan. This is how far down this plan's tentacle has reached. And Trump was trying to and is trying to stop that. He reduced regulations on home construction and he eased mortgage lending rules, not so that we have another 2008 blow up where we're giving people mortgages they can't afford, but so that people can actually attain mortgages at a fair rate so they can buy a home instead of renting for forever. So this was all part of the one plan of just getting everybody not able to own, restriction of movement, restriction of freedom. And I mean, you can go into Mamdani and see it there. He's working on creating a socialist hellhole there. And he's proposing a balanced budget. Look, I balanced the budget. We're going to have zero debt. Again, it's not approved. It's a proposed budget. He didn't actually balance the budget, but he sells it like he did. He makes himself sound really good, like, look what I did. But he didn't, because Governor Hochul lent him $8 billion from the taxpayers of the rest of New York State to cover his budget, which is not balanced because he wants to pay for all these freebies for illegals and other people who don't want to work for things in New York City. And he's not paying into the retirement funds of city workers for another 5 or 10 years or whatever the agreement was. Again, it's part of, like I spoke about, the Cloward Piven strategy. All of these little things, all of these little plans look like they're independent. It looks like, oh, you're an Islamophobe and socialism is good and we have to tax the rich and all this stuff. No, the plan is to use all these little individual things to work together to destroy the entire system, let it implode. And who comes out on top but this Committee of 300, the Club of Rome, and all the little ancillary groups that want power and control? That's the end game. That is what all of this whole picture is all about. You have even like down to BLM. I mean, an activist just came out the other day in the New York Post. There was an article where he condemned BLM and he said, I was a leftist and I bought into it until I realized that what they were doing was a scam. They were basically stealing money, using it to buy themselves expensive stuff. And they weren't actually working to help Black lives. They were destroying Black communities in the tens of billions of dollars. And that again, it's the useful idiots that these people use. They motivate them by making it appear as if they are the victim. There's been some type of wrongdoing. They have the moral superiority because they know that they have to fix the system and their justification to do so violently is okay because the powers that be are saying, it's okay, we're going to take care of you. And so they go out and they cause destruction and it's not for the greater good. It's because destruction is the game plan. And it's not just Trump who is kicking back against this. I mean, you have the Supreme Court that is throwing down. I spoke about, keeping an eye on that Louisiana versus Calais case with the redistricting. The Supreme Court struck it down. They said that you racially gerrymandered a couple of districts and you have to redraw your maps. And it goes back to the original maps. The maps are drawn that way because they meaning the Democrats and the Rhino Republicans who are part of this plan, they need to stay in control. They need to have control over the people and they can't allow a independent figure like Donald Trump, who is beholden to no one because he made his own money and he actually does love this country and he's working hard to undo the 100 years of damage that has been done by these groups. They can't allow people like him to take control and take power because all it does is open up more people's eyes. There was another case with Virginia where they tried to change their districts and that was shot down by their own Supreme Court, by the Virginia Supreme Court itself struck it down and said, no, this goes against our own constitution. Why? It's not about fair election. It's not about representation of the people. It's about staying in power because if they stay in power, their pockets are lined by these groups to do the bidding of these groups that don't have the best interests of Americans at heart. They have the best interests of their own selves and their one world government that they're working to achieve. That is why Trump is working hard to go along with China. He's meeting with Xi Jinping. He's working with Vladimir Putin, not because he's a puppet of Putin, not because he's canoodling with China, who is an enemy of the United States, but because China is also an enemy of this whole globalist system. If we get these people to realize that if you work with us, you will be sovereign, we're not looking to take control over you, and you're going to make a lot of money, that's Trump's plan. Work with the United States. You don't have to be under the control of these groups. You don't have to be at their beck and call. They're working to destroy the world. Let's work to create sovereign nations that can make themselves rich and do what they want in their own countries. And that's what's going on here. All of these little things that you see that seem to be not related are all interrelated. And I don't see how they're not going to keep trying to kill Trump. They have to. They have to assassinate him. Or what they're going to do, they are going to work in the midterm elections in November to overturn the House and Senate. They're going to work to impeach Trump. They're going to impeach JD Vance for whatever, you name it, doesn't matter. War crimes, using ICE, allowing ICE to use unnecessary force against civilians. They'll frame him for something that he didn't even do, like they did in New York with his phony trials with the rape allegations from 30 years ago with no details remembered and no corroborating evidence. But yeah, he's guilty. The truth doesn't matter to them. It's the means to the end. And the end is they own control. So they will take J.D. Vance, they'll take out Trump, they'll take out Hegseth, they'll take out Gabbard, and they'll install Hakeem Jeffries, who is going to do their bidding, along with all the other rhinos and all the other Democrats who have their pockets padded. There is a reason why these people go into Congress making $174,000 a year and come out owning multiple homes. Bernie Sanders owns multiple homes, $1 million, but he's against people who have a lot of money. Well, how do you afford multiple homes making $174,000 a year? Because he makes more than that. They all do because their pockets are padded. And it's by groups like this that do those padding. So if you think I've gone off the deep end and I'm totally nuts and put on your tinfoil hat, Mons, because, a conspiracy this big, there would be whistleblowers that would come out and say what's going on. Well, yeah, there have been. They've written books. It's just not part of the mainstream. They've been demonized. They've been made to seem like they're crazy. That's why you don't hear about them. Some of the information I'm getting is, I'm not going to hide it. I read books. The Story of the Committee of 300, that breaks down everything what's going on. There have also been other people that have come out and written books about what's really in your food, that there's a group working together to put poisons in the food, which we know now, thanks to Robert Kennedy. He's come out and shown that there's chemicals in the food that are making people addicted to eating crap. It makes you overweight, which makes you unhealthy, which makes you addicted to taking drugs to counteract the effects of eating unhealthy food, which makes you dependent upon big pharma, which pads their pockets. COVID was all part of this plan as well. If you put enough fear into people, people will submit to your will, and they'll get so crazy about it and live in such fear that they will act violently towards people who try to reason with them and say, hey, masks don't really work. Fauci said it himself, masks don't work. It was in his emails. He also said if you have natural immunity, you won't be infected again and you won't give it to other people. We also saw that the vaccine didn't work. It didn't stop the spread. All of that nonsense was lies. But Pfizer donates a ton of money to all of these major organizations. All these news agencies have ads for Pfizer on them. So they're not going to go and say, yeah, I wouldn't take this vaccine. They're going to do what Pfizer says. It's the same thing with the Committee of 300. They're being controlled by these people. And if they can't be controlled with money and bought by money or ideology, then they are trapped by honeypot operations like Epstein. And that's how this control has taken over. And that's why you have this conspiracy that is hiding in plain sight that maybe people think it couldn't be, but it is, because they have control over all of the people that are working for them towards their end goal. And that is the destruction of America. And Trump is working hard to fight back. So I encourage you to look all these things up on your own, do your own research, and understand that there's a lot of noise going on every day. There's a lot of stupid things in the news and other things like focusing on crime and all this other stuff. It's all part of the bigger plan. And I've been trying to expose it in this podcast and show you what's been going on. And this is really the heart of it. This is where it originated from. And the tentacles of this reach down into every single life. And if this sounds like an episode of X-Files with Fox Mulder talking about, aliens coming to the earth. No, I don't believe in aliens. I think that whole thing was a bunch of hype. It's a smoke screen. It's a red herring. Look over here so that you don't pay attention to what we're doing over here. And actually, it was Goebbels, the Nazi propagandist, who said the cleverest trick used in propaganda against Germany during the war was to accuse Germany of what our enemy themselves were doing. So basically, it's a mirror. Accuse your enemy of what you're doing, and then they're sitting there having to play defense. How do you prove that you're not doing something? It's genius, but it's evil genius. And you can call it two things. You can just call it that people are evil and inherently want power and control, and that's why they do these things. Or you can look at it as a spiritual battle, that this is a battle between evil on earth, between the devil, and between good. And that would be God and Jesus. And that is really what it comes down to. It is a battle between good and evil. And if you open your eyes to what is going on here, you will clearly see everything that happens is a fight by Trump and by the people and a lot of the people in his administration. He still has a lot of deep staters that are in there that are working against him, working to undermine what he's trying to do. But they're trying to undo this globalist one world order, create peace internationally, create wealth for countries that are living in poverty. And he is being pushed back against in an incredibly dangerous way. And this meeting in Armenia recently was really the proof. And I encourage you yourselves to go and Google it, Google the speeches, listen to it while you're driving to work, and really hear what they're saying. Because if you read between the lines, they're saying America has toppled our one world order. We need to scramble and figure out how we're going to regain our power and our footing. So that'll do it for this episode. I hope you found this stuff interesting. If you like it, please click the like and subscribe buttons. And we're going to keep watching what's going on with this global war. And hopefully we come out on top. We have to pray, and we'll see what happens. But I'll see you next time.